Hi, this is Rich Sadowski with Center for Energy and Environment. Thanks for joining us for this operations guide overview for the miScoreR mobile app. Appreciate all of your time in attending. There may be a few more people trickling in here, but we're going to go ahead and get started for those of you that have joined us so far. So what I plan to do is to go through a kind of a high-level overview of the mobile app, how you get started, registration, and how you get to the point of generating a label. In this session, I don't plan to go through intricate details. We're going to have a second session that will go through a lot of the Dropbox cloud storage role. But my main intent here is to make sure that all of you can get up and running and understand the high-level details. So what we're going to go through first is a PowerPoint presentation that shows some of the features and the process that you need to go through for setup, registration, licensing, and so on. And then we'll have some live demo at the end. I hope that we can do this fairly informally, and we're not going to mute all of you as we go unless the noise just gets to be too much. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to just speak up, and we'll address those as we go. So again, Rich Sadowski with the Center for Energy and Environment, and so we'll just go ahead and get started. So what we're going to talk about here is how to start using the miScoreR mobile app. miScore stands for, as you see in the top here, Mobile Integrated Delivery of the Home Energy Score for Residential. There will actually be another miScoreC for commercial. As DOE continues to develop the commercial side, we're also going to develop a mobile app for that. And I know some of you have not installed yet, so I think this will help you when you do get to the point of installing. So I'm going to address this more generically for those that have both installed and have not installed but just want to understand some of the feature set. Ultimately, when you install, you'll end up with an icon on your desktop that looks something like this, miScoreR, and this is an iPad and an iPhone. It runs on both. The screenshots that I'm going to show to begin with will be from an iPad, but then toward the end of the discussion, we'll have an iPhone discussion. So you would just click on that icon to start the mobile app. That's fairly straightforward. One of the things that we've talked about for the people that have installed is the fact that you have to install TestFlight first. TestFlight here is shows the icon for it. It's actually the application that we use to install our application. Eventually, we'll be on the iTunes App Store, but during this initial deployment, we use TestFlight. And TestFlight, if you click on the left-hand side on the icon, you end up with a screen that looks something like the right-hand side, and it simply shows the latest version that's available, and you can just click the install button, and it will automatically install either the first time or updates as they become available. So what happens when you start for the very first time is that you end up with an initial setup screen that you see on the left-hand side here that asks for your first and last name, email address, and password. And this is to get you started into the app. Email address is important from the licensing because that email is what we key everything off of. The first and last name is important because that's used as your folder name on Dropbox. And the password is important because that's what locks the mobile app so other people can't accidentally use it. What you would do is fill out the information like you see on the right-hand screen, and including the password, and then click Continue. If you have inadvertently put in no password, or you put in a password that has less than 4 characters, or the password first and second time that you entered it don't match, you'll end up with some error messages. There are error messages like that throughout. If you don't put in an email address that's a complete address, for example, same sort of thing. But you can just go back in and correct and then continue. And once you click continue, you end up with a message that asks you if you want sample visits. And we'll come back to this in more detail, but the idea here is so that when you first get started, instead of ending up with just a blank screen, you can have it populated with sample visits that you can use for demonstration purposes, to test, to play with, to understand how the process works, and generate a label off of one of them right away. In either case, whether you say yes or no, you'll get a registration reminder, and this is actually new to the version that just got released yesterday. So that registration reminder will just tell you that you aren't registered yet, and please register. If you click the right-hand button of that, the register button, it'll take you directly to the registration screen. If you said yes instead of no, you end up loading a set of sample visits. One of the things that I'm showing here is the fact that whenever there's a longer operation, there's a progress indicator, which you don't see it animated here, but in the center of the screen where it says import sample visit, there's a circle, and that circle will be spinning. And as long as that circle is spinning, then the app is active and working. So in this case, it will load those sample visits and populate that visit screen, which you see on the right-hand side. And again, you get the nag for the registration. And the reason I keep bringing that up is because in order to use all the features of the app, the Dropbox features, and the ability to generate a home energy score, you will need to register and license. Part of that is our requirement, but much of that is DOE's requirement. DOE requires us to license every user so that we know exactly who's calling their home energy scoring tool. Kind of high-level review here. The visit screen that I show here, and right now I show it here empty just so that we don't have a lot of confusion on the screen. There are icons on the upper left and upper right. Upper left is the setup icon, upper right is the options icon. And those icons or similar icons are always up there in the upper and left and right. And those represent menus. If you click on those, you get a drop-down menu. Some of those menus are multiple levels deep. So any menu item that has 3 dots after it, which is called an ellipse, if there's 3 dots after it, that means it's going to another screen. It may be another menu, or it may be a whole nother screen. And we'll see some examples as we go forward. The menus are all dynamic. So things show up on the menu as appropriate for the role that you're playing or as appropriate for the situation that you are in. So on the right-hand side, for example, you see that if you are an auditor, you get the top right menu. But if you are licensed as an administrator, you actually get a slightly different menu. All of the menu items are basically there, but they're shown in different ways based on what that role's responsibilities are and what they would normally do. So if you're an auditor, for example, the synchronize button is at the very top because that's what they do first and foremost. And synchronize is the act of matching the information that's on your mobile app with Dropbox cloud storage. If you're an administrator, your roles are different, and the auto import and auto export are very high on the list because those are functions to pull information into the mobile app from Dropbox, process it, and export it back out. For example, an auditor has completed a visit, and you as an administrator need to review that before you complete it. So here's one of the examples of going to a screen. You have the visit screen on the left-hand side. You click the setup icon on the upper left, click the out, and you get the screen on the right-hand side. And the reason I bring this up is that is the screen that shows you what version you're running. And that may be important in some cases where we're trying to debug to be able to know what version you're running. So I'm going to show you a couple other features, and this is really by a set of examples to show you kind of the depth of sophistication that's built into this app. We aren't going to go through every individual feature, but I certainly encourage you as part of the evaluation to explore everywhere, and we will be adding documentation to explain every feature, but we haven't had a chance to do that yet. So in this case, the screen on the left represents a font size that has a lot of information on the screen, but the font is pretty small. And if you're older like me and you wear bifocals, that may become a problem, but we have a solution for that. The solution in this case is that you can click on the setup icon and then Other, and when you click on Other, you see this second level menu, which I talked about before. And two of the items on there are font size, plus and minus. So you can increase or decrease the font size to adjust to the device that you're working on and the person. Some people like to have more information on the screen. Some people like to see it bigger. So in this case, if I took this exact screen and clicked the font size button twice, I would end up with this. And here you see the font size as we were originally looking at it on the left-hand side, and the font size on the right side after you've increased the size. So this gives you a very convenient way to adjust the sizing. And this is an intelligent sizing. It doesn't just change the font size, but if you look, the icons are bigger, the bubbles are bigger, all the controls are bigger. It's actually a pretty sophisticated way of increasing the size so that everything scales appropriately, and it doesn't just have larger font. So this is a shortcut method for getting to a larger font, but there's other ways of doing this, and one of the other ways of doing this is, again, to go to the setup icon, click on Preferences. Preferences, as you see on the right-hand side, are a whole list of things that you can change, adjust for your particular purposes. And so you can then, in this particular case, I've highlighted the font size toward the bottom. You can adjust the font size directly from the preferences, as well as the shortcut that I showed earlier. Don't be afraid to play with any or all of these settings. If you think you got yourself into trouble or you don't know what the original default was, we put in a factory reset just one click away that you see in the upper right here. And that factory reset will set all of these preferences back to the original settings when you install them. That's a real convenience and allows you to play, experiment, explore through the features and not be worried about, geez, I don't remember how to set it back to what it was. I think this is something that I learned years ago when I bought a digital camera that had 100 settings on it, and they were smart enough to do the same sort of thing, which is where I copied this from, where there was a single button reset that would reset all your colors and white balance and everything else, and you didn't have to worry about it. So this is, I think, the last detail that I'll show, and this is database options. The database options are some things that you can do to the visits that are on the mobile device. So in this case, if I go to database options, I get a second menu, which I've shown here, and that second menu allows you to do a few things that I'll talk through. On the bottom is a reload sample visits. Early on, we had that screen where when you first started, you were asked whether or not you wanted sample visits, and let's say you may said no, but now you want those. You can always re-import the sample visits at any time, and you can re-import multiple sets of those if you want to. So it's always available to you if you need it for demonstration or if you just wanted to play with those sample visits and then start over again. Similarly, there's a delete options menu item that you see at the top of the submenu. If you click it, you get the right-hand screen, and it allows you to delete everything on your local device. So the default is clear the local database, which you see at the top on the right-hand side. And that will delete all your sample visits or any other visits that you've created to date. Again, this gives you a way of clearing your decks and then starting over again if you want to experiment. So what I often do is I will experiment with the sample visits to try something, manipulate them, delete them, copy them, whatever I'm doing, and then I'll come in here and use the delete options default to just clear the local database and then reload the import using the import sample visits. And that, again, allows you to restart where the evaluation would have naturally started when you first loaded the application. So it gives you a very convenient way to experiment and evaluate the application. The Dropbox backup and restore, which you see in the middle on the left-hand side, the backup to Dropbox, restore from Dropbox, are used to back up all of your visits from your local device to Dropbox or to restore them from Dropbox. We'll get into that in more detail in another session with respect to the Dropbox operations. Similarly, on the right-hand side, the clear active visits, clear delete visits, clear backup, clear log, those 4 items below the break there where it says the following options apply to program folders on Dropbox, those are all Dropbox operations, and we'll talk about those in another session. So the main thing that I wanted to get out of this particular screen was the fact that, again, you don't have to worry about what you may have done with the visits and how can I get them back. You can always clear all of your visits out in one fell swoop here, and you can always bring back all of your sample visits. So very similar to your preferences, you can play with those, and then you can restore them all back to factory settings. I'm going to stop there for a second just to see if anybody has any questions. This is kind of the introductory, very high level, trying to explain what the big structure is. Next thing we'll go through is a little bit of the registration and licensing process. So anybody have any questions? Not hearing any, I'll continue. If you do have any questions, certainly speak up. So we're going to talk a little bit about registration. I'm sorry, did someone have a question? I will continue. Registration and licensing is, I think, a somewhat confusing issue, and so I'm going to go through this with a little detail. The reason we require registration and licensing is that every app has to be registered to a specific person that we have to give access to so that we meet our rules, requirements in DOE. Not anybody can access the home energy scoring tool, and so we have to make sure that we follow their rules with respect to access to the home energy scoring tool. On the left-hand side, you see a copy of the registration reminder that I had talked about earlier. And if you get that reminder, and that reminder will come up every hour. So we've made that into a nag to some extent because we want everybody to register. You can use the app without registering, but you can't access the home energy scoring tool, and you can't access Dropbox, as the message on the right lower side indicates. So if you get one of the nags, you can just click register, or at any time you can click on the upper left-hand setup icon and then click register in the registration in the drop-down menu. So you have a couple options here. What you end up with is a registration form that you need to fill out. And what you see in the upper left of this form is more than one page long, so the left and right-hand side are just continuations of the same form. On the upper left-hand side, you see the information that I had entered when I initially loaded the application. First and last name, email, password. For registration, you need to enter all the other information that has a red asterisk next to it, the address, city, state, phone numbers, and so on. And on if you scroll down in this registration form, you see the right-hand screen, and what you see in the arrows, in the circles, are the fact that there is no organization, and your licensed role is an auditor. And in the lower circle, you see that the Home Energy Score production and sandbox are both no. And that means that you haven't been licensed to use the home energy scoring tool, and your organization not being filled out indicates that you haven't been registered at all. So you would fill out this form and hit the Submit Registration button at the bottom, or you can use the upper right-hand icon for the options and click on Submit Registration. So here I show that form filled out, and I click Registration, and I end up on the right-hand side with a progress indicator. Again, remember that little circle of dots is spinning around to indicate progress in a live operation. So the Submit Registration process will submit the information to us to review and then grant a license. If there is missing information, it will come up with a message box indicating that something is missing. The end result of the registration will be the form, the screen on the left-hand side. You'll end up with a Submit Registration box that indicates success. And we need to make the type a little bigger, but right now, if you read the type, it says, please call a phone number or email me to license your app. And what this is really saying is that once you submit the registration, you need to contact us to tell us that you've submitted the registration. And then we will act on that registration. And typically, if during this evaluation process, we'll turn those around a lot quicker, but typically we'll handle that in 2 to 3 business days to make sure that the organization and the person is appropriate, and to grant a license for them. Keep in mind that the licensing is to a particular email address, which should be your email address. So all the licensing for the app is to the email address that was submitted as part of the registration. And that's the email that we will notify that a license has been granted. Once a license has been granted, and you're informed of that, and it will be a few hours to 2 or 3 business days, it won't be instantaneous. And I think there's been some confusion about that you register and that you would be licensed immediately, and that is not the case. The licensing is a manual process that we have to do internally. Then you would go to the registration form. Again, click on the right-hand icon and click Read App License, Read Application License. And what that will do is read the granted license and make sure that it exists for the email that you submitted. There will be a progress indicator during the read process, and then you will end up with a screen on the left-hand side. Oops, wrong page, sorry. You'll end up with a screen on the left-hand side which says license found, and do you want to read that license or resubmit? In this case, you would read that license. So you've registered, we granted the license, we've let you know that the license is granted, you read the license, you end up with a progress indicator again as indicated on the right-hand side, and then you end up with a registration screen that looks like the one on the left and right here. On the left, you see that your email address is now grayed out. And the reason that it's grayed out is it's locked. Once you are granted the license, you cannot change your email address. On the right-hand side, in the two circles, you see the two areas that I had pointed out before. And in this case, the organization is Minnesota CEE, and the license role is evaluator for this particular example. And on the lower circle, you see Home Energy Score, Production, and Sandbox. I'm not licensed for production, but I am licensed for Sandbox. So this is giving you a way of looking to see if you're licensed and what your licensed role is and what you're allowed to do. In production, the Home Energy Score production would say yes instead of no. And so, and instead of being an evaluator, you would be either an administrator or auditor. So that, let's go back to this for a second. We had talked about roles before, and in this case for evaluation, some of you are licensed as evaluators, others are licensed as administrators. The access rights are the same on both. The difference is that an evaluator is not set up with a specific qualified assessor ID number. So those people that are Home Energy Score partners today and are active, we have set them up with a test qualified assessor, and I've sent that to each of you. For organizations that are not currently Home Energy Score partners, we've set them up as evaluators because they're using a common ID number for the qualified assessor. We talked about user roles, and there's a way to choose the user role. So on the left-hand side, you see that if you go to the setup icon and then other, you'll end up with an advanced feature, and that advanced feature takes you to the screen on the right-hand side where you can change the user role. So you can select any user role that is more restrictive than your licensed role. You can't, if you're, in this particular example, if you look at the list from evaluator down to administrator, auditor, and a restricted auditor, if you're an auditor, you can't change your role to be administrator, for example. But if you're an administrator, you can change your role to be auditor. The primary reason for doing that is so that administrators can switch to auditors when they help auditors so that they see exactly the same screens. The menu structure would be the same as the auditor that you're working with at that point. So let's start over again. We've now registered. We've licensed our app. We have some understanding of the overall structure of the app. So this is, on the left-hand side, is a screen that you would see when you first start the app after having been out of it for a while. There's a timeout, and that every time you then come back into the app, you have to log back in with the password that you originally created. You can change that password at any time by going to the registration page. So the main reason for this password is so that when your app is inactive, someone else can't just pick up your mobile device and start making changes on the information that you have. So the right-hand side is now a visits list with the 7 example visits. And you can navigate to any one of these visits by clicking on that particular visit. In this case, I'm going to go to the 689 Minden site, but we could go to any one of them. And you can do exactly what I'm doing with your app using the samples because you have exactly the same samples that I have. So once I click on that particular visit, and let's go back to that just to make sure that we're clear. We call these visits, but they call them audits or home visits, or I think everybody has some different terminology. We decided to call them visits because that's a more generic name, and at least for the Home Energy Score, we're really not doing audits, we're doing scoring. So the terminology, don't be confused by that. It's interchangeable, but our terminology is a visit. Each of those are something where you're going to the home and inspecting it. Once I click on a particular visit, I end up in a summary view. This is the summary view on an iPad. We'll look at an iPhone shortly. With an iPad, you have more room, so you end up with a area on the left-hand side, which we call the quick nav, and that area is a definition of each of the data sections, and a single click on any one of those data sections will take you directly to the data entry form for that data section. So it's a quick way to navigate, one click. On the right-hand side is the summary view, and the summary view is a long scrollable form. You can drag it independent of the left-hand side by going vertically and drag. If you drag it all the way up, you'll end up with a screen on the right-hand side where the score results are at the very bottom. And you notice that the black horizontal dividers are the same exact sections as what you see in the quick nav on the left-hand column. You can also do a left swipe on the right-hand summary view, and that is a quick way to go either directly to the top of the screen or directly to the bottom of the screen. It interchanges. And then one other shortcut is if you look at the top middle of the screen where it has the time, that's actually part of the Apple operating system. But if you click on the top of that in any form, it will navigate to the top of that form. Now this is true not just of our app, but any app that you have, any web browser that you have, it'll take you to the top of that web page. So that's just something that's built into the operating system. But it's a convenient thing to know, and most people don't know about it. So in this particular view, I show that you can click on the score results on the left-hand side, bottom of the quick nav, or you can score on the score results on the bottom of the right-hand side, and they will lead you to the same place. So they're interchangeable. And whichever works better for you in the particular context that you're at, you can use. And here's just for comparison, these are actually screenshots from an iPhone. So now we have a much smaller screen, but all the functionality is still there. And so if you look on the left hand of these three panels, that is the visits page. It's the same setup, but it's more compact because you have a much smaller screen. And we dynamically adjust for the screen size. So whether it's an iPhone or an iPad or an iPad mini, which is in between, and eventually the Android devices, it adjusts for each of those. Similarly, if you click on that 689 Minden visit, you end up with the center screen, which is a summary view. What you don't see here is the quick nav because there is no space for that quick navigation. But you can, similar to the iPad, you can drag that vertically. You can do a left swipe and alternately go to the very top of the form or the very bottom of the form. Or you can click on the timestamp at the very top center and automatically move to the top of the screen. I don't show it here, but if you take an iPhone and reorient it to landscape instead of portrait, the quick nav will show up on the iPhone. So I don't have a screenshot of it, but if you look at this and envision in your mind that you're looking at iPhone, looking at in landscape mode, you would end up with the quick nav and the summary view both shown. And similar, if you click on the data sections, you go to that data section. In this case, I'm showing clicking on the score results in the right-hand panel. And the reason we're going to the score results because there's another licensing issue that we need to deal with here. So the score results goes to a page that allows you to create the home energy score label. And this is after you've entered all the data and you are now ready to submit that data to the Department of Energy's home energy scoring tool. At this point, if you have not already logged in, you will see on the left-hand panel, it will say log in first. And that is just telling you that you haven't logged in as a qualified assessor, and you have to do that once a day. So the qualified assessors, once they log in, they're good for the day, but they do have to log in every day to ensure that that qualified assessor is still the one using this mobile app. Again, this is a Department of Energy requirement on us. So in this case, if you click on the login first, you'll get the middle panel, which says, gives you a chance to log on to the sandbox or cancel. The reason that it's a sandbox is that is the area that we use during the evaluation so that we don't accidentally create home energy score labels in the production environment, and this avoids DOE from having to worry about confusing test scores from actual scores. So the sandbox is simply a separate web server that Lawrence Berkeley National Lab maintains that allows us to do testing. But the process and the label is exactly the same, except there'll be a watermark on it that says sample. And we'll see that in a moment. So if you do sandbox logon, you will actually get switched to another screen, which is the Department of Energy login screen. And in this case, what you have to do is enter your OpenID URL and then click login. What I show here is the OpenID URL has already been filled in. And if you remember from our registration, and I can go back to that later, in the registration, you can actually enter your OpenID URL once and never have to enter it again. So it's automatically used for you going forward. It's a long URL, and it's not something that you want to enter every time you want to log in. So we've made that convenient for you. So you would click the login. The login goes from this government site, US DOE government site, to the panel on the left, which is actually, in this case, Google OpenID. We use Google OpenID as the OpenID provider because it has the best screen adaptability for small devices. So the left-hand side panel is actually the screen that you see from Google, and that's not our website, it's Google's website, where you enter your email and password to log in. We found that Google ID or Google Plus simply does a better job than anybody else for small screens. Once you enter your email and password and sign in, that information goes back to DOE, who authenticates it, and then it comes back to our mobile app, and you end up with a middle panel that says you are logged on as a qualified assessor along with your assessor ID number. Remember, that doesn't have to happen every time you create a home energy score label. It only has to happen once a day. And if you don't create any labels, like if you're an administrator and you're reviewing information instead of creating labels, you never have to log in. The right-hand panel then shows that once you've been authenticated by Department of Energy, you are qualified to generate a label, in this case a sandbox label. So you would click the Generate Sandbox label. There's a significant delay, about 30 seconds, and you get this left-hand panel now with the progress indicator that's spinning around. This delay is not our delay. It's actually Lawrence Berkeley National Lab server that takes this long to generate the information. So it goes through some messages, and then you end up with a center panel which says, okay, I've entered all the information, it's all complete, you're ready to generate a label. Do you really want to generate a label? So this gives you the ability to stop at this point if you want. And if you have second thoughts about the data, you can go back and review your data, correct your data, whatever you need to do. But this would, at this point, have proven that all the data is there and it's acceptable to generate a label. Normally, you would just continue, but you don't have to. If you say OK to generate, you end up with another wait, in this case about 30 to 60 seconds. The right-hand panel indicates the progress indicator for that. And again, this is time for the Berkeley National Lab server to do the analysis, generate the label, and then download the label back to our app. Once that is done, you end up in the left-hand panel here, which is the label, which is the whole report. It's a 5-page report. And you'll notice that there's a sample-only watermark on this label to indicate that it was generated by the sandbox. These are not official labels, and they can't be counted as official labels. But all the calculations are exactly the same as an official label. So they can certainly be used for evaluation, and they can be used for testing, but they can't be used as a final deliverable to a homeowner. Once you're done with that label, you can click the Done button at the upper left, and you'll end up back in our app. And the table in the middle, or the panel in the middle, shows what you see when you come back, where the label has been created. Basic statistics and statuses are shown in the middle table. But there's a lot of other data that also comes back. The label on the left-hand side is a PDF, and there's no electronic information available there. If you click the data, label details, what you see in the middle panel, you end up in the right panel, which is a long list of the data that's on the label, but all electronic and all downloadable so that you can use it. And I've just shown a very small piece of that information, but it scrolls down and you see all the information about the scoring and the energy use and the as-found conditions and after retrofit conditions. So all of that information is available. For those that are Home Energy Score partners now and have looked at the summary information that DOE provides on a monthly basis, I believe to most of you, the data that we capture is about 280 fields compared to what DOE captures for your summary views, which is about 80 fields. So we capture a lot more detail that may be useful for your analysis going forward. So once you've created a label, and then let's go back to here. So once you've created a label, on the right-hand side, you'll see in the upper left, you return back from that label up. You end up on the left-hand panel here, which is back in the summary view. And the key thing to notice here is that once you've labeled a visit, you end up with this red labeled indicator, and that the visit record is locked. The visit record is locked. And that's because once you've created a label for a particular visit, you can't make changes to the data that went into that label. It's the same idea as the official home energy scoring web tool, where once you create a label, you can't look at the data or edit the data. We allow you to look at the data, but you can't edit it. And then as you go back to the visits page, which is in the center panel, you'll see that that visit is now marked as labeled, and it's moved to the bottom of the list. The visits list is organized by scheduled date, and if you look closely in the third line of each of those visits, there's a scheduled time and date. So that is your appointment list for the auditor. And those visits that have been completed, in this case labeled, get moved to the bottom of the list because there's nothing else that that auditor needs to do with that label. So the next step for the auditor is to, at the end of the day, let's say, is to synchronize their data. The synchronization process moves the data that's completed to Dropbox. It backs up all the active visits to Dropbox. It imports information that the administrators may have set up for them to schedule new visits. And it does it all in one step. There's actually about an 8-step process for synchronization. So if I show here on the right-hand side that the right-hand panel, I click Synchronize, and what we're looking at is the menu that an auditor sees. We end up with the left and center panels over time, where there's a step 1, step 2, step 3, up through step 6, where the synchronization process automatically looks for new schedules, looks for completed visits, looks for anything else that it has to do, and does all of that automatically for the auditor. When the synchronization is complete, you end up with a right-hand screen. And in this simple case, and we can show a more complicated case, but in this simple case, that bottom visits, the 689 Minden, is now gone. And the reason it's gone is that it was labeled and therefore complete. And the synchronization process moved it to a completed folder on Dropbox for an admin to review. Because it's been labeled and is no longer available for edit or other uses, it's no longer on the auditor's mobile device because they don't need to see it. So if you think about this process, what's happening is that the auditor is constantly receiving new scheduled visits or creating them themselves. And then as they're completing those, they get moved off their mobile device to Dropbox. So what the auditor has at the close of any one day is the list of visits that they need to still act on. Those that they have completed are gone. And all the active visits are backed up on Dropbox. So you literally, at the end of the day, someone does a synchronization and they drop their phone into the pool that night. If they pick up another device, they can install, license, and pick up the backed up visits without ever talking to us. The licensing is transferable to another device. The visits are backed up and they can be retrieved. And so there is a process by which you can, within a few minutes, you can take a new device and set it up and start doing home energy scoring visits again. So we've thought about the issue of devices being lost or devices being damaged, or you're just upgrading from an iPhone 3 to an iPhone 5 because it's time to upgrade, or to an iPad. So we try to make that process as seamless as possible. My intent in this session was to kind of go this far and then do just a little bit of live demo and take questions. We're going to do another session where we talk about the data entry more, and we talk about the Dropbox components more. But I'm trying to keep this particular session to about an hour, just respecting all of your times. So I want to stop here for a second and just open it up to questions. If anybody has a question, might be a good time. You can certainly ask at any time afterwards or email me, however it works best for you.
Rich, this is Terry Freeman. I did have a question about how long we're going to be using the sandbox, when you'll make the transfer.
The sandbox will be used for the evaluation, and as soon as we have mutually decided that you're ready to go ahead with production, then we'll switch to production. So we can do that pretty quickly, but we certainly want to make sure that you have kind of full understanding of how the app works, and before we do that.
Okay, so it's just going to be a case-by-case basis, depending on
Absolutely.
how you feel the progress is going with the auditor.
Yes. One of the things that I didn't talk about that I will in a subsequent session is that we've also created a set of 6 visit scenarios. And what we're planning to do is to send those out to each of the evaluators. And that's really your functional test to show that you can enter the data, not just to us, but to yourself, so that you're ready for field work. And those test scenarios are actually the same test scenarios that we had to go through to certify this app for DOE. But what they do is they force you to exercise a wide variety of features, and so that you're totally familiar with it. So it's really a training exercise more than, it's not really a test exercise, but it's a very important aspect of getting familiar with the app. One of the things that
it's just going to be just almost identical to the practical exam we took to get on Home Energy Score then.
It's similar. I think it's actually, I think it's more extensive, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Sure, yeah, I understand.
I guess one of the things that I wanted to point out that, again, different people have different experience sets. This particular app is the most sophisticated app that I have seen. Not to say it's the most sophisticated app ever built, but it's the most sophisticated app relative to what you see on the App Store. We are connected to Dropbox on one end, to Home Energy Score on the other end. We have lots of licensing issues that we have to worry about. And there's extensive data collection that's built into this. And so I think some people have expectations that this is a $2 app that is downloaded from the App Store and that you can use it immediately and it will be very obvious to how to use every feature in it because there's only 3 features. This has a lot more than that. And so I'm concerned to make sure that people, once they start using it, really understand how to use it and therefore use it correctly, because ultimately that's what's going to make this valuable to you. Any other questions? I'm going to switch to a live part of this demo. So what you see now is my iPad 2, as you would see it as well when you're first logging in. And so I'm going to just click on the enter the password, enter my simple password, and click unlock. And so at this point, I have gone to my visit screen. And this is similar to what I showed before, where there's the visits that are the sample visits. I have scored one of those visits. And the font's kind of small here, so I'm going to click on the upper left-hand side icon and then go down to Other and increase the font size, so font size plus. And so I end up with slightly bigger font size. I'm going to do that a couple times because I actually want to increase it quite a bit here. Which should make it a little more readable for you. So again, you can adjust this at individually, however you need to. And so I'm going to go through just a little bit of the data collection to point out a few features. Again, I'm going to click on the very top where it says Minden, 689 min. And I go to the same screen that I had shown before, where the left hand is the quick nav and the right hand is the data. And the data, as I'll scroll here slowly, is just a continuous list of all the data that's been collected for the data sections on the left-hand side. And so this is intended to review the data. The green chevrons, in this case, indicate that the data is complete. If data is not complete, they would be yellow. And if they're white, there is no data. So in this particular case, if you look at the very bottom, the score results is white because this one I haven't created a score for it. But everything else is green, so I can now create a score knowing that I have all the data entered. So I'm going to just point out a couple features in our remaining time that I think are really valuable. One of which is I'm going to go back to the visit that I created a label for, this 12345 Honeysuckle Lane, and click on it. And this is one that's already been labeled. So I can't make a change on it. But I want to schedule a quality assurance visit for this particular visit, and I don't want to re-enter all the data. So on the upper right-hand icon, I can click on it and then click on Copy. And now I have an option to create a copy that is a QA, quality assurance visit. And this will simply copy all the core information and create another visit, and you don't have to re-enter anything. So I click QA, and it creates a new visit. It calls the version QA so that there's a distinct identifier. And that's the identifier that DOE is asking for when you submit a QA to their tool. And then you put in a new schedule information and a new assessment date, but other information like all the location information, I'm going to click on the location section. The location information is already there. You don't have to re-enter it. So this is a quality assurance visit that I've just created without having to re-enter anything from scratch. I'm going to do the same thing for another variation of this, which is I'm going to go back to the Honeysuckle Lane at the bottom, the labeled one. So I click on the very bottom visit, and I have this labeled visit. And now the scenario is I want to do a rescore. This original score was done with the house as originally found, but now I have upgraded it and added some additional measures, energy efficiency measures. So again, in the upper right-hand icon, copy, and now I have a copy rescore as an option. And that actually copies all the data in this particular visit and allows you to resubmit it after you've edited it for those changes that you've made. So maybe I just added attic insulation, and in this particular case, for example, I could go to the attic, so I just clicked on attic, and let's say I went from R19 to R38 in the attic, and that's the only change that I made. So I can now go back, save that change, and I am literally ready to create a score on this. That's all I had to do a rescore where I had this one measure that was installed, or it could be 2 or 3 measures. I didn't have to re-enter any information, and when I resubmit it to DOE's home energy scoring tool, I don't have to re-enter all the data manually. It's already there. So the one last example I'll show is, again, I'm going to use the very bottom visit, the labeled Honeysuckle Lane visit. And let's say that I entered this information, but I actually made a mistake in the data, which I'm sure all of you have done at some point or other. There's a lot of data entered. There's a lot of ways to make mistakes. So another option in the copy is copy fix score. And this is where you want to fix the score that you had previously created. And if I hit copy fix score, it will actually create another copy. And you'll see that the version now in the upper right says fixed score to indicate that this is a new score, and you're going to correct it. And as importantly, the old score is kept and remarked. So I'm going to go back to the visit screen, and now you see at the very bottom where it says Honeysuckle Lane, it says labeled error bad data. And if I pull that one up, you'll see that the visit status, which is down about 5 on the right-hand side, says labeled error bad data. So the original score is kept but marked, and the new score can be just corrected and resubmitted. And again, from a process standpoint where people have to re-enter all the data from scratch, this is one of the features that I think really makes that process work much smoother. There's a lot of other features. I'm out of time here, and I respect your time, so I want to stop at this point. But I just wanted to point those out because there's a lot of those kinds of features that I think you really need to become aware of to really get full value out of this. We're not trying to just replace the clipboard. We're trying to improve the process. And what I just did could be pulled from a visit that's on the mobile device, but it can also be imported from an archive on Dropbox. So something that was scored a month ago can be pulled up now and rescored. So I'm going to stop there. We're going to do another session later, probably next week. I'll open it up for questions one more time. And if there are none, can you unmute? So we're just muting you now. Any last minute questions? We will be posting this along with the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll send out a link to all of you so that this whole session is available for you, for the people that didn't have a chance to attend. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Certainly, if you have any other questions, let me know individually. And like I say, we'll post everything for you as well. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Rich.